Hey guys, Dave with First Place Auto Parts, and you know headers have been a long-held part to increase performance. Look, they look cool, but they also help the engine breathe better, and after all, an engine is just a big air pump. When it comes time to buying your headers, you have a lot of different choices, but in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the different types of coatings to help reduce underhood temperatures, and then we're going to verify if those coatings make any kind of horsepower increase. Look, some of these applications, whether it's ceramic coating or header wrap, claim to hold heat into the tube that helps create the scavenging effect that you get with a well-designed set of headers. Is that the case? Well, I've witnessed these things being tested inside a dyno cell, and at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you if any of these things or which one of these things made more horsepower. So guys, today we're talking header coatings and also header wraps. Which one's right for your car? So stay tuned. When it comes time to buying headers, typically most people opt for the cheapest version, and that is what's called a coated header or a painted header. And look, this header that came out of the box from Hooker Headers is a beautiful piece, and it does have a black coating on it, but don't confuse it with ceramic coating or even paint. This is merely a coating that's on these headers, your base stock headers. Typically, they're going to be your least expensive option that keep them from rusting. I pulled this thing brand new out of a box, and they were in a bag, and they've already started to, there's a little bit of rust already starting up here on the head tubes. This is merely a coating for transportation. Look, you put these things on, you fire them up, what you're going to do is you're going to see a lot of smoke, and then the next day you're going to see a lot of rust. So we got to do something with these stock headers or the base level headers. They're good headers, it's just you need to do something with them to make sure they don't rust and they look good under your hood. So when it comes time to your options, the first one's going to be what's called header paint. And header paint is good to up to 12 to 1500 degrees. VHT makes some really good header paint, and to apply this you have to properly, you scuff this with a Scotch-Brite pad, wipe it down with some acetone or brake cleaner, and you spray this on liberally. And look, there's a curing process. Make sure you read the instructions on the back of this can, especially when they're on the car. It's easy to do, but you have to follow that. I've used this on my 56 Chevy. This has worked well for a long time, other than it being white, and which collects a lot of dirt and grime from the road. VHT header paint is definitely an option. It's going to be your lowest cost option, and the reality is when it comes time to protecting a header, this stuff can work. Now, when it comes to paint, don't be tempted to try the cheaper barbecue paint. This stuff is good to up to 1200 degrees, or it resists heat up to 1200 degrees, they say, but in reality is its operating temperatures in its happy place consistently is around 800. So don't be confused, don't be tempted to use barbecue paint. A lot of guys do that, and the reality is they gotta pull the headers off, sand them back down, and then reapply the VHT header paint. After that, the next step up, we get into what's called a header wrap. And a header wrap has got a fibrous material. All I can tell you is that when you install header wrap, make sure you wear gloves, because you will feel like you grabbed insulation for a week. Your hands will itch for a long time. But header wrap is something that you apply to each individual tube and then to the collector, and then you attach it with either metal zip ties or some sort of a hose clamp. And then third, and the most expensive option, is going to be your ceramic coating. Look, you can buy these headers ceramic coated already, and that's a great option. The other option is to take your base header, your basic black header like this, take it to some place that specializes in coatings and have them do it. Now, ceramic coating was often being advertised as being a thermal heat barrier. And in the dyno room test, I'm going to go ahead and let you know, it does reduce heat slightly over paint, but it's not as much as you would think. So those are your three options. You got paint, header wrap, and ceramic coating. So let's go ahead and take a look at the performance of each one. I mentioned earlier that all these headers were tested in a dyno cell, and some things you need to know about a dyno pull is typically they're done between 3,000 and 6,000 to 7,000 RPMs, depending on the motor. In this case, it was a small block Chevy. In a dyno room, it's a very controlled environment. It doesn't quite mimic what's going to be in your car, but it's close. In a dyno cell, you also have fans blowing because you don't want the intake temperature to go up. So there's a lot of exhaust fans and a lot of fans that are blowing across the headers to keep them cooler, but it's still a relevant test. Now the painted header, it did pretty well. It actually did really well in regards to the overall internal temperatures, but also the external temperatures. So when we talk about header coating performance, what we're going to talk about is the external temperature. Is it something that transmits a lot of heat or heat soak to the surrounding things like your starter? The other thing is going to be inside the tube, and that's important because a lot of these thermal coatings or these wraps are touted to increase the internal temperature, which in theory increases the scavenging effect of a set of headers. So let's go ahead and read off those numbers. Painted headers on a dyno cell, the exterior temperature ranged from 400 at the beginning of the pull to 484. The internal or the EGT temperatures ran from 630 at the start of the pull to 795. Ceramic coated headers, the thermal barrier coating, at the beginning of the pull, the exterior temperature was again at 400 degrees and it went up to 479 by 6,800 RPMs. The internal temperature started at 630 degrees, same as the plain painted header, and went up to 800 degrees. So there was a 5-degree temperature difference inside the tube of the ceramic coated header. And finally, the wrapped header, the header that has the external wrapping all the way around it. It started also with an exterior temperature of 400 degrees. It only went up to 425 degrees by 6,800 RPMs on the dyno pull, and the exhaust temperature, gas temperature, started at 635 degrees and went up to 845. In the end, the performance difference, both external and internal, between the painted header and the ceramic coated header was almost nothing. It didn't make much of a difference. The wrapped header, however, it reduced external temperatures by 50 degrees. And it also increased the internal or the exhaust gas temperatures, which in theory would increase the scavenging effect of a set of headers. But the reality is, this 350 cubic inch Chevrolet at 6,800, it made 450 horsepower with each one of these coatings. It didn't matter if it was painted, wrapped, or ceramic coated, it made the same horsepower at the end. So in regards to your street driven vehicle, it's not going to make a huge difference in regards to horsepower, but it might make a big difference with the underhood temperature. Clearly the wrapped header is the way to go. Now the pros and cons of the painted header is something that with the painted header you're going to have to paint it once in a while, but it's super easy to touch up and it's fairly cheap. The ceramic coater header, look, that thing's durable. It's going to look great for a long time unless you're going to break a camshaft in. Look, if you break a camshaft in with a ceramic coated header, what you're going to find is that coating is going to chalk up here. I've done this with the 56 Chevrolet. It had silver ceramic coated headers originally, and I broke a camshaft in and I had fans blowing on each side of the engine to keep the headers cool, but it didn't matter. After 5 or 7 minutes of above 2,500 RPMs, it did haze. It damaged the ceramic coating. So if you're going to dyno a motor or if you're going to break a camshaft in, I would recommend a set of just bare headers because it's going to burn either the paint or this ceramic coating off of this tube right here. But the wrapped headers, look, if you have a problem with underhood temperatures, particularly if you have a bulky starter after you've driven your car and you go to turn it off and it heat soaks that starter, a wrapped header absolutely has an application in your case. Now, the downside to these wrapped headers is, like I said earlier, they can cause rust. It holds a lot of moisture in. The header itself is ugly, and I can tell you it's a painful process to wrap all these tubes, especially if you don't wear gloves. It's a very convoluted process. You've got a lot of zip ties, metal zip ties, or hose clamps holding these things onto each tube, and quite honestly, it just looks like a hairy beast under there. So the wrapped headers aren't the best aesthetically, but from a performance application, especially underhood temperature application, wrapped headers are the way to go. And when it comes time to buying your headers, please check us out at First Place Auto Parts. We've got a ton of performance and restoration parts for your classic American muscle car truck, tons of late model stuff too at fpautoparts.com. Guys, I hope this video was helpful for you and a little bit informative. The next time it comes time to buying your headers, consider the paint. Look guys, this thing's an inexpensive way to go, and it's fairly durable and it's cheap. Guys, until next time, keep the hammer down and keep between the guardrails.